The sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed calm, almost hypnotic, but there was something wrong in the air. The overcast sky created a heavy atmosphere. As the small rescue boat approached, the fisherman spotted a figure drifting, floating in the vastness of the sea. A woman, weak, with her eyes closed and her body almost motionless, seemed lost among the waters. They pulled her into the boat, but it wasn't the stormy sea that left everyone in shock. It was what she carried in her pocket. The rescue team, usually accustomed to emergency situations, froze for a moment. That woman, seemingly just a simple castaway, was not only drifting in the waters. She was carrying something that no one could have imagined. Something so hidden in her pocket, yet when revealed, would change everything. "She can't be who I think she is. She can't." That's what one of the fishermen thought as he held the item found. But what exactly did she have there? What could be so important that even the most experienced among them were left in shock? The rescue of the woman seemed like a simple act of kindness, but what was found in that pocket challenged everything they thought they knew about her. The mystery was just beginning. What was she really doing out at sea? How did that small object in her pocket connect her story to something much bigger and more dangerous than anyone could have imagined? The question that hung in the air was simple, yet full of mystery. What did that woman have in her pocket that left everyone in shock? The beach was strangely empty for a summer morning. The sky, once blue, now displayed shades of gray, as if sensing something wrong. The sea, calm but with treacherous currents, reflected this silent tension. The wind carried with it a scent of salt and seaweed, but something in the breeze felt different. It wasn't an ordinary day on those shores, and soon the fishermen would understand why. It was around 7 a.m. when the first shouts echoed along the coast. "There, in the sea!" One of the fishermen pointed to the figure floating, almost imperceptible, as if it were part of the waters. The woman was visibly exhausted, with her eyes closed and her body semi-motionless. She seemed to have been dragged by the sea, but with no strength to fight against the waves. The rescue was swift, as expected from men accustomed to facing the ocean. But when they brought her aboard, what followed was not part of their plans. The woman's body was cold, her lips purple, and her heart nearly stopping. "Quick, we need to get her to the shore!" shouted one of the fishermen, his voice choked with concern. They were used to finding people lost at sea, but something about this woman seemed different. She wasn't just adrift. She was carrying something, with her, something that seemed heavier than she was. As the boat neared the shore, the fishermen began to discuss what to do. The woman was starting to regain consciousness, her eyes blinking slowly, trying to understand where she was. But what caught their attention more was the fact that, even in her critical state, she was holding something in her pocket, gripping it strangely, as if she didn't want anyone to touch it. As if it were the most precious thing in the world. And in the minds of the fishermen, the question arose, what could be so important? "Let the woman breathe, don't touch her," said the oldest of the fishermen, an experienced figure, with more than 30 years on the sea. His voice sounded firm, but there was a touch of apprehension. Something about this situation wasn't right. He knew that when the sea brought someone back, it was rarely just a simple rescue. There was something more behind it, something he still couldn't understand. And what was she carrying in her pocket? That seemed to be at the heart of the mystery. With her still cloudy eyes, she looked around, and with a visible effort, she pulled the object from her pocket. Her hand trembled, but she seemed to have an inexplicable urgency to hide it. However, what she didn't know was that, by doing so, something was beginning to be revealed. And before she could hide it again, one of the fishermen, more curious and faster than the others, managed to see what it was. A small object, something that seemed ordinary at first glance, but with a meaning they would soon begin to understand. This can't be happening," murmured the fisherman, his expression changed. He was paler than usual. What he saw in that object was something that shouldn't have been there. The tension began to grow. What had seemed like a simple rescue incident was now turning into a mystery. And each of the fishermen knew they were about to become involved in something much bigger than they could imagine. By the time the woman fully regained consciousness and tried to speak, her words were interrupted by the situation unfolding. "I don't know where I am. Who are you?" Her voice was weak, but there was something in her gaze that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. But what no one expected was what she would say next. What she was about to reveal would not only change the fate of everyone there, but would also plunge them into an even deeper mystery, where secrets, lies, and an apparently insignificant object in her pocket would reveal truths that no one was prepared to face. The woman, now with her eyes slightly more open, seemed to be in shock. Her muscles were tense, as if the simple act of breathing was an immense effort. She looked at the fisherman, trying to understand what was happening, but her mind was still wandering in a sea of uncertainties. The wind still blew strongly, and the waves, though calm, gave the impression that they were hiding something deeper and more dangerous. "You're safe now. We'll take you to the shore," said one of the fishermen, trying to calm her down. He noticed her anxiety and couldn't help but wonder, why did she seem so scared of something as simple as being rescued? The woman didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes was distant, as if she were seeing something no one else could. It was an empty expression, marked by something that had scarred her long before being brought into this sea. Something she didn't want to reveal. The fishermen began to move toward the shore, the boat rocking slightly under the weight of the waves. But before they reached their destination, the woman finally spoke, almost whispering, What happened to my pocket? What did you see?" Her voice was weak, but the desperation was clear. She knew what was there, but somehow she seemed unwilling to admit it. It was then that the youngest fisherman, who had been the first to touch the object, decided to ask the question that was choking everyone's throats. "What is this? What do you carry in your pocket? This isn't just anything." The woman looked at him, her eyes watering, and seemed to hesitate for a moment before trying to compose herself. "I don't know. I don't remember. But, no. Don't touch the pocket." The tension became palpable. The fishermen exchanged quick, confused glances, while the older fisherman, the most experienced, tried to stay calm. "Look, if you won't tell us, we can just let you go. But if this has anything to do with what we've gotten ourselves into, we need to know," he said, trying to be firm, but without hiding the tone of apprehension. Deep down, he knew something wasn't right. They were involved in something much bigger than a simple rescue. Something didn't fit. The woman swallowed hard, and for a moment, it seemed like she was fighting against her own memories. But when she finally spoke, her words were not what they expected to hear. "That object in my pocket. I was being watched. They were watching me, and now you're watching too. I can't tell you everything, but what's in my pocket might be your only chance to understand what's going on." Silence took over the boat. The fishermen, now more unsettled than ever, looked at each other. Who was watching her? Who could be behind her, and why? A sense that something much bigger was at stake began to take over everyone there. With the woman's words still echoing in their heads, one of the older fishermen, feeling the growing pressure, said, "Let's get to shore first, and then we'll think about it." "But we won't ignore what she's saying." The woman, still tense, nodded slightly, as if she had no choice. When the boat finally touched the sand of the beach, the woman was carefully removed, but without haste. She was fragile, and her eyes were fixed on the pocket, as if she feared someone might steal it. The youngest fisherman, still obsessed with the contents of the pocket, discreetly approached. He needed to know what was inside. "I need to see what you have. We need to understand. It might be important," he said, his voice almost inaudible. But as he tried to reach for the woman's pocket, she reacted quickly, placing her hand over it with surprising strength for her state. "Don't touch it. Not now." Fear was etched on her face. Something in there wasn't just important to her, it was vital, as if it were the key to her survival or her doom. The woman, feeling the growing anxiety around her, finally gave in a little. "All right. But you can't tell anyone." Her eyes were filled with a pain the fisherman didn't know how to decipher. She slowly withdrew the object from her pocket and handed it to the fisherman. The small object seemed mundane at first glance, a metal piece, worn by time, with a symbol engraved on it. However, the impact of this revelation was instant. "What is this?" the fisherman murmured, holding the piece with an almost reverent care. "I've never seen anything like this before." The symbol engraved on the piece didn't appear to be from any known country, nor from any familiar culture. It was something enigmatic, something that shouldn't have been there. The older fisherman, wide-eyed, took a step back. He was beginning to feel that something was terribly wrong with the situation. What seemed like a simple rescue was now becoming a race against time. "Now, we need to figure out who she is, and why she was out at sea," said the older fisherman, his voice heavy with uncertainty. The object in the fisherman's hands seemed ordinary, but the feeling in the air was anything but ordinary. The metal piece with the strange symbol was weighing more than anyone could imagine. The old fisherman, still silent, stared at the piece with a worried expression, as if a distant memory was trying to emerge from his mind. This is not good," he murmured, staring intently at the symbol. "Where did you find this?" he asked the woman, his voice now lower, as if the pressure of the moment had unearthed something in his subconscious. She, still trembling, responded in a soft voice, "I don't know. I just knew I had to hold it. I can't explain more. I just know it's involved in everything." Her eyes were lost again, as if searching for something on the horizon, but finding no answers. The fishermen were divided. Some just wanted to take her to safety, forget all of this, and move on with their lives. But others, especially the youngest one, were obsessed. Curiosity and fear began to mix into a thick layer, only worsening the situation. The young fisherman, still holding the piece, looked at the others and said, "We can't just ignore this. Who knows what this means? Who knows what she knows? She's not telling us everything." The older fisherman glared at him with a look that said more than words ever could. Sometimes, it's better not to know. Some things are better left buried. But he knew that, at that moment, there was no turning back. That rescue had become something bigger and more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The wind picked up in intensity, and the clouds above the beach began to close in even more, as if the sky itself felt the gravity of the situation. The old fisherman, realizing they were being watched, looked around. The feeling of being surveilled grew with every passing second. He had lived long enough to know when something was wrong. And this was wrong. "We need to leave. Take her to the house next door," ordered the older fisherman, trying to take control of the situation. "No." The young fisherman hesitated for a moment, but the old man was already walking away with the woman, forcing her to walk. She seemed dazed, yet still kept glancing at the symbol, as if something was calling her, something she couldn't understand. The walk to the nearest house was silent, but tense. The young fisherman looked back, making sure no one else was nearby. But deep down, he felt that something was about to happen, something that couldn't be avoided. When they entered the house, the woman finally gave in. "I'll tell you everything, but you can't. You can't understand everything all at once. What's happening now is just the beginning. They will come for me, and when they arrive, you'll be in danger too." The older fisherman, tired of being cautious, tried to take charge of the conversation. "Who will come for you? What is this symbol?" But once again, the woman fell silent, lost in her own thoughts. Her expression was one of terror. It was then that the young fisherman, still holding the symbol, said, "I've seen this. I've seen this symbol before. In a book. An old book my grandfather had. It talked about secret societies, something older. I'm not sure, but this is connected to something much bigger than simple myths." The woman raised her eyes, and for the first time since they rescued her, something important passed through her gaze. "Your grandfather was right. But you don't understand. They are everywhere, and if you don't leave now, if you don't run, you'll be caught too." A loud knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Everyone in the room fell silent. It was a low but continuous sound, as if someone were trying to enter urgently. The fishermen exchanged glances, and a sense of panic began to rise within them. The woman was visibly trembling now, her eyes fixed on the door, as if she knew who was on the other side. "They've arrived," she whispered. The older fisherman, his hands already trembling with nerves, stood up. Who's out there?" But before he could reach the door, a hoarse voice echoed from the outside. "Open the door, it's an emergency." The urgency in the voice seemed real, but something inside each fisherman made them hesitate. They knew they shouldn't open that door. But at the same time, the feeling of being watched intensified. And, like a primal instinct, fear drove them to move toward the window. What would come from the other side could change everything, or perhaps destroy their lives forever. "O som dos batidas na porta pericia esse arrastar como uma amica imminente. Cada segundo que passava, o silencio esse tornava mais pesado, mais denso, como es algo esteves prests acontecer. O pescador mais velho, com uma expresso de aprienso, alhu para mulher, que estava em estado de pânico. Sus olhos estavam agora arregalados, e suas mãos tremiam violentamente. O medo msu rosto era palpável, como es ela soubesse exatamente o que estava por vir, mas neo podia ou neo queria dizer. Quem está do lado de fora? Quem são eles? O pescador mais jovem perguntou, com a voz carregada de uma tensão crescente. A mulher, incapaz de responder de forma clara, olhou para a janela e, com suspiro pesado, disse, eles neo veo parar, esteo todo lugar. O pescador mais velho, sentindo o perigo iminente, tomou uma decisão rápida. Fica-me atrás de mim. Se for alguém de confiança, nos vamos abrir a porta. Se neo, estamos seriosos problemas. Mas, antes que pudéssemos se mover, a voz do outro lado de porta cortou oar novamente, agora com tom mais grave e ameaçador, eu disse, abram a porta. Neo tentem fugir. A tenseo estava no og, e os pescadores se entreolhavam, sem saber qual seria o próximo passo. A mulher estava pânico. Sus olhos estavam fixos no símbolo, agora na mesa ao lado, e parecia que a chave para entender tudo o misterio estava ali, naquele pequeno objeto metálico. Mas, como se sentindo forcada a revelar algo, ela susurrou, aquele símbolo, a chave para tudo. Neo so quem vocês pensam que sou. Neo sou apenas uma mulher comum. O pescador mais jovem, calmamente caia de perguntas e uma crescente sensação de urgência, avançou. O que você quer dizer com isso? O que você está escondendo? A mulher, sem forças para manter o segredo, olhou para ele com uma expresso que refletia tanto medo quanto arrependimento. Meu nome neo é Clara, como eu disse. Eu sou alguém que fugiu. Fugiu de uma organização. Eles sabem onde estou. Eles sempre souberam. O símbolo no meu bolso. Foi colocado lá para me rastrear. Para me controlar. A revelação caiu como uma bomba. Os pescadores estavam estupefatos, tentando processar o que a mulher acabara de dizer. Ela neo era quem parecia ser? A confuso tomou conta deles, mas do que isso, o paver de ter se envolvido algo tão grande quanto uma organização secreta comico a flor. O pescador mais velho, ainda com a mão na maquinita de porta, congela. Uma organização secreta. Você está dizendo que essa coisa no bolso, essa peca metálica, é uma marca de vigilância? Sim, respondeu a mulher, a voz quase imperceptível. Eles são mais poderosos do que imaginam. Eu descobri isso de pior maneira possível. E agora todos vocês estão envolvidos. A menos que eu consiga ser daqui, todos vocês vão ser caquedos também. Eles sabem onde estamos. O pescador mais jovem, calmamente fervilhando, olhou para o símbolo mais uma vez. Tudo fazia sentido agora, mas de forma perturbadora. O avo dele, que tinha falado sobre essas sociedades secretas, jamais havia dado a entender que as coisas poderiam ser tal raiz, tal perto de sua própria vida. E o pior de tudo, o que ela dizia tinha tom de verdade que neo podia ser ignorado. A mulher estava em pânico, mas também parecia ter conhecimento profundo sobre algo que eles neo podem compreender. Foi enteo que o velho pescador deu passo à frente, os olhos estriatados desconfiança. Nos estamos presos, neo estamos? Ele perguntou, sua voz carregada de desespero. Estávamos tão distraídos com os simples resgate, que agora nos encontramos no meio de algo que nem podemos imaginar. E, por sua culpa, todos nos estamos em perigo. Ela balancou a cabeça, com lágrimas nos olhos. Eu neo queria isso. Eu neo queria que vocês fizessem parte disso. Eu sou a culpada. Porque se eu tivesse contado tudo desde o comico, isso neo teria acontecido. A batida na porta ficou ainda mais forte, mais impatient. A sensação de estar sendo observado se tornou quase palpável. O pescador mais velho, sentindo o peso de tudo o que acaba de vir, tomo a deciso mais difícil de sua vida. Vamos abrir a porta. Se fomos mortos por isso, ao menos saberimos quem nos matou. Ele colocou a mão na maquinita e, antes que qualquer pudesse impedir, girou a porta para abrir. A cena que se seguiu aconteceu piscar de olhos. Do outro lado, não havia uma pessoa, mas uma figura completamente encapuzada, com roupas escuras e uma postura ameaçadora. O homem, o que quer que fosse, olhou para a mulher com uma frieza assustadora. Você não devia ter feito isso, disse ele, sua voz grave e semimoco. Mas não se preocupe. Vamos levar você de volta. Os outros. Eles farão o que você quiser, não importa onde estejam. O pescador mais jovem, ainda tentando processar a revelação, deu passo à frente, determinado a confrontar o que estava acontecendo. Mas o homem encapuzado simplesmente estendeu a mão, e de repente, os pescadores se viram envolvidos em uma prisão mental, como se uma força invisível estivesse os imobilizando. A última chance de escapar já passou, disse o homem, com sorriso frio por trás da máscara. The hooded figure stood before them, cold and threatening, like a shadow that seemed to swallow the light in the room. The youngest fisherman, still tense, could barely process what was happening. What he had just heard felt more like a nightmare than tangible reality. How had they gotten to this point? How had a simple rescue at sea led them to face such a dark threat? You have no idea what you're dealing with, the hooded man's voice resonated through the room, his tone empty and menacing. She tried to run. Now you all will be taken as well. There's no escape. The older fisherman, who had kept his calm up until now, seemed to hesitate. His expression was hardened by fear, but also by a sense of responsibility. They were in deep waters now, and there was no turning back from this situation. He knew he needed to act, and quickly. So, what do you want from us? The older fisherman asked, trying to maintain his composure, but anger and desperation were starting to seep through his voice. Because if you're here, that means you're going to kill us too, right? The hooded man didn't answer immediately. He stepped toward the woman, who was still wide-eyed, trying to understand how she had gotten to this point. She looked fragile, defeated, but her expression was also a mix of relief and fear. As if, for the first time, she was surrendering to the reality of it all. No. Killing you won't be necessary, the man said, still keeping the same relentless tone. But your part in the game has already been defined. And now, you have to pay the price. The woman, now looking more desperate than ever, stepped forward. They have nothing to do with this, she pleaded, her voice broken with emotion. If you're going to take me alone. Leave them alone. They didn't know anything. But the man didn't seem impressed. He looked at the fisherman with a cold, calculating gaze. It's too late for regrets. The truth is, now that you're involved, there's no going back. The youngest fisherman, feeling a growing anger, stepped forward, challenging the hooded man. I won't let you do this. They're just fishermen, and all they did was help us. Now, you're going to get out of our way. He tried to take a firmer step, but like an invisible hand, an immense force stopped him from advancing. The hooded man simply raised a hand, as if controlling the situation from a distance. Don't do it, the man said calmly. You have no control here. There's no way to stop what's already in motion. At that moment, the older fisherman looked out the window, and as if he had made a decision long ago, he pulled the young fisherman aside. He's right. We can't fight this with force. We need to be smarter. We can't go on as if nothing is happening. They will hunt us down. The woman, with the expression of someone who knew she had only one chance to save herself, looked desperately at the fisherman. You need to run. If you stay here, you'll get even more involved. They'll come for all of you. There's no more time. The older fisherman knew what he had to do. He grabbed the symbol, still on the table, and held it firmly. We're leaving now. But we need a plan. We can't just wait for this to resolve itself. We have to find a way to neutralize them. The hooded man sneered as he watched the fishermen talking among themselves, as if there were still some hope. They're not leaving here. There's nowhere to run. What started now won't end with an escape. But the older fisherman, with a fierce calmness, turned to the group. We'll leave, and we'll do this together. We won't let her story become our sentence. The woman, feeling despair take over her mind, finally surrendered to reality. There was no turning back now. But as the hooded man remained impassive, something inside her still resisted. She knew that, if there was a chance, it would be now. They needed to escape, or their story would end the same way hers did. "Hurry," she whispered, almost voiceless. "Now." But before anyone could react, a figure appeared behind the hooded man. It was a second person, equally hooded and equally threatening. "They won't escape," the second person said, their voice cold and emotionless. "We're already too close." The woman, her eyes wide with fear, looked at the fisherman. They were in a dead-end situation. The pressure was mounting. Every second felt like the last. And what awaited them outside the house was more than just a mystery. It was the end of everything they had known. Pagunter AO ChatGPT. The air was thick, heavy, with a pressure that seemed to stop any movement. The woman was on the verge of despair, but a faint glimmer of hope still burned in her eyes. She knew they could wait no longer. They were being hunted, and there was no time to lose. But the arrival of the second hooded figure, who emerged like a shadow behind the original man, put everyone on high alert. Now, the situation had become even more unpredictable and dangerous. "They can't leave," the second figure said, her voice deep and authoritative. It was a woman, but the tone carried no emotion. She seemed completely indifferent to the fate of the fisherman and the woman. "Their time is up." The woman, who had been on the verge of collapsing, closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if searching for strength somewhere deep inside her. Then she looked at the fisherman, her eyes filled with silent pain. "I have no choice. I have no choice. There's no more time." The fishermen were on the edge of collapse. They were witnessing something far bigger than any shipwreck or simple rescue they had ever experienced. Something that went beyond everything they could comprehend. "I knew this was going to happen," the woman whispered, more to herself than to the others. "I knew that sooner or later they would find me. But I didn't know it would involve so many people. And now, all of you are here, because of me." The older fisherman, trying to make a rational decision amid the chaos, looked at her and said, "You're not to blame for this. We chose to help you. But now, we need to find a way out of here. They won't stop until they catch us. We can't wait any longer." It was then that, with a terrifying calmness, the hooded man stepped even closer to the woman. He looked directly into her eyes and said, without any expression, "You should have done this a long time ago, Clara. You had no choice. And now, the secret you're hiding, what's inside of you, will be revealed. No matter how long you try to escape." Clara, with her eyes brimming with tears, looked at him with a mixture of anger and resignation. "I know who you are. I know exactly who you are." Her voice was stronger now, but still laden with latent pain. "And I know what you and your organization really want from me. What you never understood is that I always had a card up my sleeve. Always." The youngest fisherman, still holding the metal symbol in his hands, stepped forward. "What does she mean by that?" he asked, looking from Clara to the hooded man. "What's going on here? What game are you playing?" The hooded man, paying no attention to the young fisherman, kept his gaze fixed on Clara. "You think this is just a game, don't you? That you can escape. But you know as well as I do that, in the end, whoever controls the information, controls the world." He paused, as if savoring the moment. "And the secret you carry, Clara, is not just something that could destroy us. It's bigger than any of us can imagine. You've always known that." The fishermen were increasingly confused, and fear was now overtaking them. What did this secret mean? What could be so powerful, so dangerous, that an entire organization would be willing to do anything to possess it? Clara, realizing she could no longer hide the truth, looked at the fisherman with a determined expression. "I didn't want this for you, but now there's no going back. What you have in your hands, what you've discovered, is tied to the greatest secret of our time. That metal piece the fisherman is holding, it's not just a marker. It's a key to the truth, to what this organization is really trying to achieve." The youngest fisherman looked at the piece with disbelief. A key. But what does it open? What does it really mean? Clara took a step forward, her eyes now fixed on the piece, and spoke in a lower voice, almost a whisper. It doesn't open something physical. It's not a door or a vault. It opens something much bigger. Something that could change everything we know about the world, history, and the future of humanity. And if this organization gets what they want, they will have power over all of us. The hooded man smiled, as if the revelation had finally unfolded the way he expected. This is just the beginning, Clara. You thought you could escape, but what you didn't understand is that the secret has always been within your reach. Now, the price will be paid, by all. The tension grew, and the fishermen, now aware that they were involved in something much larger than they could have ever imagined, braced for what was to come. The battle for that secret had just begun. But at the same time, the weight of responsibility fell on Clara and on them. The air was heavy, as if time itself had slowed down. Clara was there, at the center of it all, with the fishermen around her, and the two hooded men now seemed more than a threat. They were the messengers of something much greater and far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. And even with the truth beginning to emerge, the fishermen still didn't understand the depth of it all. You don't understand, do you? Clara said, her voice now stronger, more resolute. The metal piece, the key you have, it's not just a key to ancient information or old secrets. It's not something you can simply hide or destroy. It contains the power to change everything. Everything. The youngest fisherman, still holding the piece in his hands, felt the weight of Clara's words. He looked at her, trying to understand what she meant. What do you mean by that? What does this key really do? The woman looked at the hooded man, who was watching everything with a satisfied smile. She took a deep breath, as if preparing to finally reveal the true secret. What you don't know, Clara began, is that this key, this symbol, is tied to a legacy of centuries. Long ago, a secret society, far beyond the one you know, created a mechanism to control the flow of time. They were seeking immortality, but not in the way you think. They wanted to control the future of all, of humanity. This key, it is the key to the portals of time. The fishermen were stunned. The idea of time portals seemed impossible, absurd even. But something in the way Clara spoke, something in the seriousness of her words, made them question if there was a greater truth there. The older fisherman, with his eyes fixed on the metal piece, shook his head in disbelief. Portals of time. Are you saying this is real? Clara nodded slowly, her eyes now weighed down with the burden of truth. Yes, it's real. Very real. But no one has ever understood how to use this key, or what it really can open. The organization that's chasing me, they know this. They know that the key you have is the only thing that can access the portals and change the course of time. The hooded man, who seemed to be waiting for the right moment to intervene, finally spoke with a cold laugh. Clara, you still don't get it, do you? What you carry is not just a key. It's the key to the end of humanity. You, and everyone here, are about to become part of something much bigger. Something that cannot be stopped. The woman turned to him, her face hardened by anger and pain. No, you're wrong. We won't let you do what you want with this. The truth, the real truth, lies with those who know how to use it, not with you. We are the only ones who can stop them from using this key to enslave the future. The youngest fisherman, still holding the metal piece, looked at Clara with a new understanding. Her story, what she had said about the future and the key, was no longer a fictional tale. They were, indeed, at the center of something incomprehensible. Something that could change humanity in an irreversible way. It was then that, suddenly, the metal piece in the fisherman's hands began to glow, a bright, pulsating light. The fisherman instinctively stepped back, stunned by what was happening. The symbol on the piece started to shine, radiating a strange energy, as if responding to something. Don't touch it! Clara shouted. The key, it's activated. This is what they wanted. The portal is opening. The hooded man and the hooded woman stared at the piece with wide eyes, but before they could make any move, an invisible force knocked them to the ground. It was as if the very energy of the piece was taking control, pushing them away from the key. The light from the piece began to expand, filling the room, illuminating every corner, growing stronger and more intense. Suddenly, the environment around them began to distort, as if time were being stretched and pulled, forming a wave of light and darkness at once. It was as if space and time themselves were intertwining. The fisherman and Clara were in shock, unable to move a muscle, as the portal opened before them. The sound of temporal distortions echoed through the room. And, in an instant, everything stopped. The light vanished. And, when the fishermen opened their eyes, the world around them was unrecognizable. They were in a completely different place, a place that shouldn't exist, a place that shouldn't be there. The portal had taken them to the future. The light of the portal finally dissipated, leaving a sense of discomfort in the air, as if time and space had been stretched to their limits. The fishermen, still wide-eyed in shock, were now in an environment they didn't recognize. The future, or whatever that place was, stretched before them, an alien landscape, marked by buildings that seemed from another world and an eerily silent atmosphere. Clara, still dazed, tried to process the situation. She looked around, trying to understand where they were. "This shouldn't have happened like this," she murmured, her words echoing in the vastness of the place. The youngest fisherman, still holding the metal piece, looked at Clara with an expression of perplexity and fear. "So, this is it. The future is no longer what we knew. We're here, in the middle of something we can't even begin to understand." The older fisherman, his voice trembling, looked at the others. What happened to our world? What is this place? How is this possible?" Clara, her mind still racing to connect the pieces of the puzzle, took a step forward. "You don't understand. By activating the key, we weren't just transported. What's happening now is a consequence. The future, as we knew it, no longer exists. Everything that's happened so far, everything we've done, was a decision that changed the course of things. And now we're here, in the future of a new world." The youngest fisherman, his eyes fixed on the piece, finally spoke. "You said what they wanted was to control the future. Now, we're in the future. Can we change something before it's too late?" Clara looked at him seriously, and for the first time, a shadow of hope passed over her face. "We can. Yes, we can. But we need to understand what we've done, what we've activated, and what the future needs from us. We no longer have control over what's happened. But if we know what to do, we can try to reverse it, or at least save what's left." The future was now a distorted reflection of what they had known. But deep down, Clara knew that the true battle wouldn't just be against external enemies, but against time itself. They needed to figure out how to stop the organization that hunted them from taking control of the new world, or somehow find a way to restore what was lost. But above all, she knew that, at the core, the greatest challenge would be understanding what it meant to save a life, or save an entire world. As the fishermen prepared to face this new future, Clara spoke the words that would echo in their minds, like an eternal lesson. Because, in the end, saving a life is saving an entire world.